this is my review of Slime Diaries. Okay, so the best way I can describe this episode is of the entire village of Tempest just preparing crops for winter because they are now able to actually do so. So it starts off with Rimuru not kind of going out about his daily routine. He's starting work, and then Shion and Rigor tell him that he doesn't really have any urgent work that he needs to take care of at the moment, which is a first for him apparently. So he decides that he's going to just laze about for the rest of the day, and they strongly encourage it, telling him that they'll handle all the small stuff so they don't have to worry him. However, after a few minutes of just kind of sailing around, twiddling his thumbs, fidgeting, and just kind of doing things to pass the time, he realizes he doesn't really have any idea of how to actually relax because he is kind of a workaholic. So he immediately pops his head back into the main office to ask Shion and Rigord if there's any change in updates and if there's actually any work for him to work on. And sure enough, he then voices his concerns to Gopta, who decides that he's kind of an expert at taking it easy and pointing out that he can actually show Rimuru how to relax, and then proceeds to show him around the shopping district, although Rimuru ditches him shortly thereafter once he realizes that Gopta's just using that as an excuse to ditch his work duties. Case in point, when Hakaru and Rigor show up, he heads for the hills and they hide in an alley. So yeah, Rimuru quickly realizes that he's not really trying to work at all. So he just kind of leaves Gopto to his own devices. Meanwhile, as that's happening, Benimaru is actually sharpening his sword inside the house, and Shuna asks him what he's doing and if he's idling about, and he merely remarks that he's honing his sword to keep everybody safe, pointing out that it requires due diligence and that he can't afford to slack off even on his days off. And Shuna ultimately admires that about her brother, pointing out that that's an honorable goal, but then also kicks him out of the house, pointing out that she needs to clean and that he's kind of in the way, so he can do his stuff outside. So yeah, he gets a little upset with her about that, but it's funny. It's kind of funny and cute. But in any case, it then comes back to Rimuru, who is talking to Geld about how he realizes that he's a workaholic as well, and that he can't really lecture Geld anymore because they're basically in the same boat. However, Geld merely retorts that Rimuru kind of takes pride in the work that he does, whereas Geld just kind of loses himself in his work and doesn't really know what to do with himself when he's idle. So for that reason, they're kind of sort of different. But as they're talking, a bunch of goblin kids start climbing around on Geld, and Rimuru asks him if he likes kids. And Geld points out that he's not exactly sure if he likes them, but it just kind of happens. So clearly he likes kids, but for whatever reason the kids just kind of flock to him. So yeah, it's a cute little touch, but apparently kids like Geld for whatever reason. Apparently they just like hanging around him, and he's just kind of content with being a babysitter. So it's cute. But in case, back in the main office, Shuna is doing her cleaning routine, and Rimuru decides to just kind of play around with it, with his duplication ability to just kind of make his own secret fun, as he puts it. So basically, he just plays around. He bounces around like a bouncing ball. And Shuna has no idea that that's what's actually going on behind her. Every time she turns around, Rimuru is either gone or has pieced himself back together into one, and nobody is the wiser. But as he's doing that, Ririna actually walks in, and I'm going to picture her here because while she has been in an episode, she's mostly been a background character, and we haven't properly met her yet. So yeah, she makes her debut in a spin-off series. I mean, that's the kind of thing that just kind of happens, but sometimes characters don't get a proper debut in an episode, so they just kind of show up in subsequent media instead. The Death Note has a couple of characters that are like that, but in case, Ririna shows up and with Shion in tow, and points out that the fields that Rimuru has been preparing for crops have actually been prepared, and now they can actually go and successfully cultivate crops. And Rimuru is more than excited to do that because being able to plant crops means he's actually able to work again. So he immediately jumps at the opportunity and tells her to bring everybody together immediately. At which point he gathers all of his followers together at the field and points out that they're going to work hard to actually ensure that they have crops, and that by doing so they're actually going to be able to vastly expand what they can and can't eat. So yeah, everybody's excited, and Shion even prepares some special meal for everybody, but before she can even hand it out, because obviously Shion isn't the best at cooking. We've already established this many times before now. Rimuru orders everybody to go to work and get working. And of course, during this sequence, it starts off with the goblins actually working out, the hobgoblins. They're working on the field and they're complaining about how much work it is, and then they see Gobta just kind of lounging in the shade. And when they point out that he's not even working, he merely responds that he's meditating, which is bullcrap. But but it's enough to convince the others to stop working, leaving only Gobzo. So yeah, Gobzo kind of just works by himself for a little bit, and eventually Kirby shows up and tells Gobta that his reward for defeating Gabiru has actually come in, and points out that it's a weapon that can split the earth in half with a single strike. And Gobta is ecstatic because he thinks it's going to be this impressive weapon, but when he unwraps it, he finds out that it's actually a hoe for tilling land, and he then takes his frustration out on the field and clears out the field in record time. And meanwhile, Shion notices that they've actually got a lot of soybeans and wonders what they're for. And Rimuru merely remarks that soybeans are actually a very precious type of food to be planting because they can be used to make a whole sorts of things. And also tries to scare Shion by pointing out that one of them is in essence rotten beans, which isn't actually true. They're fermented. I don't remember the exact food that are used to make it, but he tries to use it to scare her and should point out that he's going to pay her back for all the times she's cooked meals for him in the past. Only for Shion to completely misinterpret what was said and decide that Rimuru actually likes rotten beans for his meals, and that she'll be able to use that to make a bunch of new meals for Rimuru, much to his chagrin and his vocal concern. But in any case, also he asks Gabiru to take care of the rice, pointing out that they live in a marshland and that planting rice should be no problem. And also points out to Gabiru that he takes rice planting very seriously, and that he doesn't want them to see them slacking off. And Gabiru is more than happy to do so, and even tries to show off their song and dance that they practiced in the last episode. But Rimuru shuts them down and just tells them to get to work. At which point Gobto finds Rimuru and tells him that Ririna has actually finished planting all of these spring crops, and that they've actually been planting the spring vegetables. And Rimuru goes to investigate, and when he sees them, he actually congratulates Ririna on her hard work. And also points out that they put up a scarecrow, which Gobta is initially a little confused about because he doesn't know what the practical purpose the scarecrow serves. And Rimuru explains it to him that scarecrows actually scare off crows, birds, and other predators that would try to eat your crops. And to an extent, it is successful. Ririna professes that even with the scarecrow up, the birds are a little too smart for their own good and have actually eaten a crop or two now and again. At which point, Gobto decides to actually improve upon the scarecrow to see if he can actually make it better, so that's scaring off the birds, pointing out that they're too smart for their own good. So what he does is he makes it an exact likeness of himself, and then they go to hide to see if the scarecrow is effective. And long story short, it isn't, and in fact the crows actually attack the scarecrow instead of the crops, and it gets completely destroyed. At which point Rimuru hands Ririna a target and tells him to put that up instead, though she's completely confused as to what it is. So, but in any case, but also while they're doing this, Sui and his party are actually planting seeds, although so he merely makes it look like a training exercise by throwing a bunch of shurikens into the dirt and then leaving. And only Suka is able to actually figure out that that's actually what his intentions were. But he yells at her to stop dawdling, and she quickly catches up behind him. And then also once they break for lunch, Shuna and her goblin helper, I don't know her name, they go out, at which point Garm and George show up and point out that and ask the two where they're going, and they merely respond that they're going to be bringing lunch to everybody to get prepared for their next bout of work, and prepare to bring lunch to everybody. And after they leave and tell George and Garm goodbye, George and Garm remark that to each other that they're actually good girls and that they're actually very, very helpful. And then decides to go all out making more work clothes for everybody else to just kind of admire the work clothes that they made, which Garp actually shows up and points out that they get a little bit too into their work. So yeah, basically long story short is that they kind of trash the house to make new outfits, but in any case they show up But in any case, Shiona and the others show up to give everybody their food. And as they're eating, the kids actually come up to Benimaru and ask him how they get so strong. And he merely remarks that it takes proper diet and exercise to get so strong, and that they can't be picky eaters. And then demonstrates the point by picking up a rock and smashing it with his bare hand. And the kids are so over the head over heels admiring of Benimaru's sheer strength that they decide to take his advice to heart. At which point Shuna gives him his meal, but he ultimately goes completely against what he just said 5 minutes earlier, and tells her that she was supposed to take out the carrots, but she merely remarks that he can't be a picky eater. So the irony of that situation is that Benimaru, in essence is a little bit of a hypocrite, because he tells kids that in order to grow up to be big and strong, they have to not be picky eaters, but he himself is a picky eater who doesn't like carrots. So yeah, it's a little bit funny. But in any case, they proceed to go back to work, and Geld is actually helping out with a lot of different things. He's there. He's just kind of helping out with a bunch of different side projects. At which point, Rimuru asks him to come help plant some plants. Since he's there, he might as well help. And with Rimuru's guidance, Geld is actually able to carefully plant some plants, and points out that they'll eventually grow up in the spring, and that now that they've been given a gentle nurturing touch, they'll actually grow up to be big and strong. And Geld is kind of moved to tears a little bit after seeing that he's now a papa. So he asks if he can come and see the plants again once they're done. And Rimuru merely remarks that they'll all be back in the spring anyway. So he doesn't see any reason why they can't go and check up on it every now and again. But in case after all of this, Rimuru stands back to admire all the hard work that he and the rest of his followers have put in to actually put in all of these crops. And he's happy. He's content. Seeing it actually fills him with a bit of joy, and points out that they'll be able to actually do some more impressive things with the crops going forward. And then proceeds to grab a hoe and go back to work. So, at which point nightfall, and after toiling away the whole day trying to plant crops, night eventually falls, and everybody begins to celebrate a job well done afterward, eating a nice dinner, drinking whiskey and other things, and just kind of chatting the day away. At which point Rimuru and Trainee sit down together, and Rimuru and Trainee have a bit of a conversation. So Trainee points out that how hard everybody works, and points out that she's going to be proud of them when the crops come in. And Rimuru points out that he's also particularly proud of it, because, as he points out, once the crops grow in, they'll be able to have a much more varied group of food. And Trainee agrees with that, pointing out that being able to grant nature its ability to grow up is a very important thing. And Rimuru does point out that now that he's glad that they actually have a genuine seal of approval from a dryad, since that's pretty much their whole thing. Dryads are like beings of nature, so naturally if they approve of what they're doing and the crops that they're being grown, then obviously the Dryads are going to approve of it. But then Trainee points out that she hopes that she'll be able to help next time. And then Rimuru realizes too late that he actually forgot to invite her to actually help plant crops, and then tries to apologize profusely to her as she begins to cry and poke the dirt with a little digging thing. I forget what the little digging shovels, the little hand shovels. And Gato is quick to point out that Rimuru made her cry and that he should have just invited her from the get-go. So. Yeah, and then as after an after credits shot of this is that Rimuru after all the crops have been planted and it starts to rain for several days, and Rimuru and Gapta are quick to point out that the rain is kind of putting a damper on their mood, but Trainee actually takes a bit of a happy, solemn solace in it, because as she points out, the rain actually enables a lot of different critters to grow. It enables crops to get bigger. It enables basically a whole bunch of things that make the circle of life go round, and that everything will eventually go back to making the earth stronger. At which point, Gapta remarks that that's probably why Trainee seems to have put on a couple of pounds, which causes the gentle rain to go into a downpour, which is implied to be the result of Trainee's mood. And they quickly close the window. And also, there's one last little scene related to the one we saw earlier with Rimuru and Shuna, where Rimuru tries again to do his little duplicate trick again to screw around, but this time Shuna actually catches him in mid-flight and actually pulls him into a fierce hug, pointing out that she's finally caught him. So yeah, overall this episode is just kind of a really cute little episode where they go to plant crops for a half hour. It's really cute. It's really cute. It's just this episode this series is literally just a slice of life anime in disguise. But it basically, long story short, is that the anime this episode just kind of shows Rimuru and his friends planting a bunch of crops and trying to make the village a better place because of that. So yeah, it's very cute. It's a very cute and wholesome little episode, and I do indeed enjoy it. But yeah, there's not much else that actually happens of any importance in this episode, because it's just a slice of life series. But the only real thing that happens is that we actually meet Ririna for the first time, because she hasn't really been in an episode before this. This is her first episodic appearance, and because she didn't really appear in the original series at all. She debuted in this episode of this spin-off series that is somewhat related to the last one, but not really. So yeah, that's the only really new thing that happens in this series. But in any case, yeah, that's gonna do it for my review of Slime Diaries. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks. I'm always saying thanks, so be sure to check those out in the description below as well. But, in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!